start off with. Before I take credit for all of it, we had some very special things that happened with the Changing the Narrative grant, and those were our community partners who gave so much and made it happen, library folks in particular, both Roanoke City and Roanoke County libraries. And also our facilitators, and this is why I couldn't say no to Doug for talking tonight, because every time I've asked him to facilitate a group, he's been there to do that. And Maria Motley is another one of our facilitators, and without our facilitators we never would have gotten the results, which I will be telling you about. So thanks to everybody who helped make this grant happen. Yes, I have been here that long, Doug. Some people may say that I'm still not a native Roanoker, but I feel there are some. But this is definitely my home and the place that I love. When I was working with Blue Ridge Behavioral Health Care, I had the great opportunity to serve as a consultant to what was called Camp Anytown. And it was run by the National Conference for Communities and Justice, which originally started out as the National Conference for Christians and Jews. And that organization started in 1928, when it was another time, like now, of religious discrimination. And then it was because a Catholic, was running for presidency. So there's a lot of anti-Catholic sentiment at the time. So they started, it was a rabbi, a priest, and a minister who met and said they needed to do something about this religious discrimination. And you'll never guess, unless you've already heard the story, where this happened, where this started. City in Virginia, of all things. Anybody know? Catherine, do you know? No. Lynchburg. Started in Lynchburg. And the purpose of this group was to educate and make people aware of discrimination and prejudice. But the camp brought high school students together, and in a week's time they built an all-inclusive community where everybody was valued and everybody had a role to play. I was lucky enough to work with that program for 3 years. And then the NCCJ closed their Virginia offices because of financial problems. And so the camp disappeared for our high school students. And this is really how Points of Diversity started. People were asking about whatever happened to Camp Anytown. And I really loved the experience so much that I tried to get some information. And I wound up in touch with the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. They're based in Richmond, and they have been our parent company for the last 5 years. We're called Points of Diversity is a program of the Virginia Center for Inclusive Communities. So we began starting out looking at this high school program, and then found that the adults were just as interested, getting further and deeper into what diversity is and what inclusion means. So after a couple of forums where we did some polling, we decided that we would branch out and see if we could make this happen. And as it turned out, we focused on community dialogue and education and training for high school students. The dialogue program are called study circles because that's the resource we use, which is a nationally recognized program that's been around for a long, long time. And we trained, I think the first year we trained like 20 facilitators. And then each summer we've been training more. So we have a cadre of almost 30 facilitators. And it's about neutral facilitation. So the facilitator never expresses their opinion, their thoughts. They just guide the conversation. And those of you who attended the dinners saw some of that, some of that happening at the dinners. So with our 30 strong facilitators and our program of small group conversations, we were really prime when my Vice Mayor Joe Cobb brought the idea of this grant to an advisory committee. And since we were the only nonprofit on the committee, Points of Diversity was basically the grant manager to make it happen. The whole idea of changing the narrative is to bring awareness to racism, past and present, particularly here in our community, and to find a way to bring people together to hear the stories of those who have been experiencing prejudice, and so people who have never heard the stories can hear them. So we picked 6 different neighborhoods and had a community meal of about 100 people, sometimes over 100 people in each of the communities. And what we believed from the beginning was that healing and change won't happen until the truth is told. And that's based on the original Truth and Reconciliation process. And the grant actually stems from the Kellogg's Foundation Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Program, which is a countrywide program that's implemented in communities. So we've been lucky enough to experience that. So what I'm going to do first of all is tell you the truths that we have found in all 6 communities. We started in Gainsborough, the once middle-class black community that was demolished by urban renewal nationally and locally. And this is the truth that was told at the first dinner by our young historian, I call him, and educator, Jordan Bell. Imagine 1,200 bodies removed from their graves and sent to a plot 15 minutes down the road and laid in unmarked graves. Imagine 900 homes destroyed, burned, and bulldozed. 200 businesses owned by black middle-class neighbors, and 20+ schools and churches destroyed forever. That is the truth of what happened to Gainsborough. And if you drive through the neighborhoods now, you still see the empty lots where things were, the buildings that used to be there. There's, I think, 2 buildings left in that whole area right now. And the fun, these are stories that were happening, and I actually lived here during that period of time. I was pregnant with my first child. I had no idea. All I knew is that both Roanoke City and Roanoke County were building new civic centers. That's the only thing I knew about it. So, a lot of people living, it wasn't in the paper at the time, or we didn't pay attention. So the stories do need to be retold. That's what. And at the meeting at Gainsborough, where we served a full meal for everyone, there were folks there who had never heard those stories. So that guaranteed our success. And we had over 130 people attend that very first meal. The second meal we had for high school students, and we did that. Roanoke College offered their campus for that. The library helped with a lot of activities for the young people, which they really enjoyed, especially the younger kids really, really enjoyed your activities. And what we learned at that one was that these students really do want time and opportunity to talk. They really do want to talk about difficult issues. And they don't have the time, they don't have the opportunity. And they want the community and or the school to do something about that. So we have a list of suggestions that we're going to take to the school boards to let them know, what the students are saying. And as one little boy said, now he knows that he's not the only one that has felt prejudice. He knows that there are other people that do. So that may have been the best learning of the whole thing. Our third meal was held at Temple Emmanuel, and that was on religious diversity. And the great learning there was, there was something wonderfully beautiful that happened there. It was during Ramadan for our Muslim friends, and so they have to fast until sundown. So we extended the meal from 6 p.m. till 9 p.m. and we ate at the very end. And then, so they went to go pray while the meal was being prepared by the men of the temple and served. And what the remarks that I have heard was the beauty of watching members of the Muslim community praying in a Jewish synagogue. That was a beautiful thing to remember. And of course, none of us took pictures of that because we felt it was too special and too important. And basically the learning from that is everybody wants more dialogue, interfaith dialogue and interreligious dialogue and interracial dialogue, which, here again, we're all white people talking about race, almost, yeah. almost. Okay, number 4, this was a unique meal. We held this one in southeast Roanoke City as one of the areas that we felt needed attention. And we called it Know Your Neighbor. The people that we worked with in Southeast really wanted other people to know that Southeast is a safe place. It's had a bad reputation of gang-ridden and crime and drug use and absent landlords, but there's a lot of beautiful neighborhoods, and they wanted people to know that they love living in Southeast. And other folks came from other neighborhoods. They came from this neighborhood. It was a really mixed group at that one. They came from Southwest County neighborhoods. And one of the residents of Southeast heard someone say, "I'm no longer afraid to come to Southeast." So it was a way to really boost up that neighborhood and give them the accolades that they needed for the residents they have. So now we're on meal number 5. That was held at Hollins. And Hollins presented their own research that they've been doing on their own legacy of slavery. They've involved the community around Hollins in investigating that, and we had some descendants of, because there were slaves that helped build and run Hollins when it first started. And there were some descendants of the slaves who attended that meal. We were at capacity at that meal, which we were really thrilled with. So we thank everybody that came to that one. And our last meal was for the Hispanic community in a time when immigration and detention, and Marissa and I have already talked about this tonight, when it's a difficult topic and hard on a lot of people. And we had some folks one was a DACA recipient who told her story. And all of the Hispanic immigrants who were there that night talked about how much they felt Roanoke, more than any other place they lived in, mostly in Virginia, anywhere around, how Roanoke made them feel so welcome. It's not so much a surprise to me, because Roanoke is part of the Welcoming Cities program and All-American City and all that, but to hear this expressed so universally, I really wish that Mayor Lee had been there to hear how much they really thought that Roanoke spread its arms out around them. And that was my learning from that meal. It was very, very heartwarming. So those are the 6 meals I have. I didn't bring it up here with me, but can you give me my folder? What we did at the end of each, I don't know which one I put it in. After the storytellers told their stories, I got it, thank you. And then the facilitators guided the guests at the tables, and we spent a great deal of time mixing up people so they were sitting at different tables and they weren't all, the same race or the same religion or whatever. That was an ominous feat, 6 times with 100 and some people each time to keep it mixed up. I think I just. So after the conversations, we asked everybody who attended to write on a Post-it things that they felt could be done differently going forward. And what came out of that was a list of priorities. Priorities for the community gatherings, priorities for education and training, and then economic and governmental and planning committee priorities, and then individual ones. So this is available, and if there's not enough, I can always bring more. I shared this with Roanoke City's planning committee, working on their 2040 comprehensive plan, and a lot of them align, which is really exciting. A lot of the things that people want are what they have put in that plan. And one of the most interesting ideas, if everybody together can pull it off, is to have a festival on the Greenway with each neighborhood featuring the best of their neighborhood, what they'd like to offer as their neighborhood. So that's something we talked about with the planning committee. Overall, Points of Diversity feels as though we were really on the right track by offering small group conversations on difficult topics. And this year we're focusing our study circles specifically on racism. So this is kind of, the theme for this year. It'd be a little bit different than this. It'd be a smaller group kind of conversation, but probably I'll talk more about that before we end this. We don't need that right now. So we're going to continue with our study circles, and to culminate the whole year for the dinners, we're planning an interfaith healing service on the 19th of January. Sheila has graciously offered the library again. We'll be at Gainsborough Library. And the idea is to, as of right now, the idea is to develop a quilt that talks about how we can change the narrative. So if anybody knows people who quilt, the people who are planning this know nothing about quilting, and neither do I. So if anybody's got any contacts, we don't know anything about what kind of fabric to get, what kind of anything. But we had another idea about burning the burdens, but decided that burning in Gainsborough is probably not a good idea. So we're going to build something to change the narrative going forward. And Points of Diversity has agreed that we will do at least 2 dinners for the next coming year, one focusing on the LGBTQ community, and one that Vice Mayor Joe Cobb asked about was a family one where children and parents can all come. So we probably wouldn't have facilitated conversation at that one, but we'll come up with something else.
Hey, what's the time on the 19th?
It's at 3. 3 o'clock at Gainsborough Library. So, any questions? And again, thanks everybody for all the support through this past year. It's been very exciting and very rewarding to be able to do this and get to know so many new people and so many great community partners.
Thank you, Judy.
You're welcome.